This tutorial will discuss aeronautical decision-making. Aeronautical decision-making, ADM, is decision-making in a unique environment, aviation. It is a systematic approach to the mental process used by pilots to consistently determine the best course of action in response to a given set of circumstances. It is what a pilot intends to do based on the latest information he or she has. The importance of learning and understanding effective ADM skills cannot be overemphasized. While progress is continually being made in the advancement of pilot training methods, aircraft equipment and systems, and services for pilots, accidents still occur. Despite all the changes in technology to improve flight safety, one factor remains the same: the human factor, which leads to errors. It is estimated that approximately 80% of all aviation accidents are related to human factors, and the vast majority of these accidents occur during landing, 24.1%, and takeoff, 23.4%. ADM is a systematic approach to risk assessment and stress management. To understand ADM is to also understand how personal attitudes can influence decision-making and how those attitudes can be modified to enhance safety in the flight deck. It is important to understand the factors that cause humans to make decisions and how the decision-making process not only works but can be improved. This tutorial focuses on helping the pilot improve his or her ADM skills, with the goal of mitigating the risk factors associated with flight. Advisory Circular AC 60-22, Aeronautical Decision-Making, provides background references, definitions, and other pertinent information about ADM training in the general aviation environment. For over 25 years, the importance of good pilot judgment, or aeronautical decision-making, ADM, has been recognized as critical to the safe operation of aircraft, as well as accident avoidance. The airline industry, motivated by the need to reduce accidents caused by human factors, developed the first training programs based on improving ADM. Crew Resource Management, CRM training for flight crews, is focused on the effective use of all available resources, human resources, hardware, and information supporting ADM to facilitate crew cooperation and improve decision-making. The goal of all flight crews is good ADM, and the use of CRM is one way to make good decisions. Research in this area prompted the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, to produce training directed at improving the decision-making of pilots, and led to current FAA regulations that require that decision-making be taught as part of the pilot training curriculum. When tested, the pilots who had received ADM training made fewer in-flight errors than those who had not received ADM training. The ADM process addresses all aspects of decision-making in the flight deck and identifies the steps involved in good decision-making. Steps for good decision-making are: 1. Identifying personal attitudes hazardous to safe flight. 2. Learning behavior modification techniques. 3. Learning how to recognize and cope with stress. 4. Developing risk assessment skills. 5. Using all resources. 6. Evaluating the effectiveness of one's ADM skills. While poor decision-making in everyday life does not always lead to tragedy, the margin for error in aviation is thin. Since ADM enhances management of an aeronautical environment, all pilots should become familiar with and employ ADM. While CRM focuses on pilots operating in crew environments, many of the concepts apply to single-pilot operations. Many CRM principles have been successfully applied to single-pilot aircraft and led to the development of single-pilot resource management, SRM. SRM is defined as the art and science of managing all the resources, both on board the aircraft and from outside sources, available to a single pilot prior and during flight to ensure the successful outcome of the flight. SRM includes the concepts of ADM, risk management RM, task management TM, automation management AM, controlled flight into terrain CFIT awareness, and situational awareness SA. SRM training helps the pilot maintain situational awareness by managing the automation and associated aircraft control and navigation tasks. This enables the pilot to accurately assess and manage risk and make accurate and timely decisions. SRM is all about helping pilots learn how to gather information, analyze it, and make decisions. Although the flight is coordinated by a single person and not an onboard flight crew, the use of available resources such as air traffic control, ATC, and flight service station, FSS, replicates the principles of CRM. Two defining elements of ADM are hazard and risk. Hazard is a real or perceived condition, event, or circumstance that a pilot encounters. When faced with a hazard, the pilot makes an assessment of that hazard based on various factors. The pilot assigns a value to the potential impact of the hazard, which qualifies the pilot's assessment of the hazard, risk. Hazardous attitudes and antidotes. Being fit to fly depends on more than just a pilot's physical condition and recent experience. For example, attitude will affect the quality of decisions. Attitude is a motivational predisposition to respond to people, situations, or events in a given manner. Studies have identified 5 hazardous attitudes that can interfere with the ability to make sound decisions and exercise authority properly. Anti-authority, impulsivity, invulnerability, macho, and resignation. Hazardous attitudes contribute to poor pilot judgment, but can be effectively counteracted by redirecting the hazardous attitude so that correct action can be taken. Recognition of hazardous thoughts is the first step toward neutralizing them. After recognizing a thought as hazardous, the pilot should label it as hazardous, then state the corresponding antidote. Antidotes should be memorized for each of the hazardous attitudes so they automatically come to mind when needed. During each flight, the single pilot makes many decisions under hazardous conditions. To fly safely, the pilot needs to assess the degree of risk and determine the best course of action to mitigate risk. For the single pilot, assessing risk is not as simple as it sounds. For example, the pilot acts as his or her own quality control in making decisions. If a fatigued pilot who has flown 16 hours is asked if he or she is too tired to continue flying, the answer may be no. Most pilots are goal-oriented, and when asked to accept a flight, there is a tendency to deny personal limitations while adding weight to issues not germane to the mission. For example, pilots of helicopter emergency services, EMS, have been known more than any other groups to make flight decisions that add significant weight to the patient's welfare. These pilots add weight to intangible factors, the patient in this case, and fail to appropriately quantify actual hazards, such as fatigue or weather when making flight decisions. The single pilot who has no other crew member for consultation must wrestle with the intangible factors that draw one into a hazardous position. Therefore, he or she has a greater vulnerability than a full crew. Several risk assessment models are available to assist in the process of assessing risk. The models, all taking slightly different approaches, seek a common goal of assessing risk in an objective manner. The most basic tool is the risk matrix, shown here. It assesses 2 items: the likelihood of an event occurring and the consequence of that event. Likelihood is nothing more than taking a situation and determining the probability of its occurrence. It is rated as probable, occasional, remote, or improbable. The following are guidelines for making assignments. Probable, an event will occur several times. Occasional, an event will probably occur sometime. Remote, an event is unlikely to occur but is possible. Improbable, an event is highly unlikely to occur. The next element is the severity or consequence of a pilot's actions. It can relate to injury and/or damage. The following are guidelines for this assignment. Catastrophic results in fatalities, total loss. Critical, severe injury, major damage. Marginal, minor injury, minor damage. Negligible, less than minor injury, less than minor system damage. Simply connecting the two factors as shown in the matrix indicates the risk is high and the pilot must either not fly or fly only after finding ways to mitigate, eliminate, or control the risk. Although the risk assessment matrix provides a general viewpoint of a generic situation, a more comprehensive program can be made that is tailored to a pilot's flying. This program includes a wide array of aviation-related activities specific to the pilot and assesses health, fatigue, weather, capabilities, etc. The scores are added and the overall score falls into various ranges, with the range representative of actions that a pilot imposes upon himself or herself. Mitigating risk. Risk assessment is only part of the equation. After determining the level of risk, the pilot needs to mitigate the risk. For example, the pilot flying from point A to point B 50 miles in MVFR, marginal VFR conditions, has several ways to reduce risk. Wait for the weather to improve to good visual flight rules VFR conditions. Take a pilot who is certified as an IFR pilot. Delay the flight. Cancel the flight. Drive. One of the best ways single pilots can mitigate risk is to use the I'm Safe checklist to determine physical and mental readiness for flying. Illness, am I sick? Illness is an obvious pilot risk. Medication, am I taking any medicines that might affect my judgment or make me drowsy? Stress, am I under psychological pressure from the job? Do I have money, health, or family problems? Stress causes concentration and performance problems. While the regulations list medical conditions that require grounding, stress is not among them. The pilot should consider the effects of stress on performance. Alcohol. Have I been drinking within 8 hours? Within 24 hours? As little as 1 ounce of liquor, 1 bottle of beer, or 4 ounces of wine can impair flying skills. Alcohol also renders a pilot more susceptible to disorientation and hypoxia. Fatigue. Am I tired and not adequately rested? Fatigue continues to be one of the most insidious hazards to flight safety, as it may not be apparent to a pilot until serious errors are made. Eating. Have I eaten enough of the proper foods to keep adequately nourished during the entire flight? The PAVE checklist. Another way to mitigate risk is to perceive hazards. By incorporating the PAVE checklist into pre-flight planning, the pilot divides the risks of flight into 4 categories: pilot and command, PIC, aircraft, environment, and external pressures, PAVE, which form part of a pilot's decision-making process. With the PAVE checklist, pilots have a simple way to remember each category to examine for risk prior to each flight. Once a pilot identifies the risks of a flight, he or she needs to decide whether the risk or combination of risks can be managed safely and successfully. If not, make the decision to cancel the flight. If the pilot decides to continue with the flight, he or she should develop strategies to mitigate the risks. One way a pilot can control the risks is to set personal minimums for items in each risk category. These are limits unique to that individual pilot's current level of experience and proficiency. One of the most important concepts that safe pilots understand is the difference between what is legal in terms of regulations and what is smart or safe in terms of pilot experience and proficiency. P is pilot in command, PIC. The pilot is one of the risk factors in a flight. The pilot must ask, am I ready for this trip in terms of experience, recency, currency, physical, and emotional condition? The I'm safe checklist provides the answers. A is aircraft. What limitations will the aircraft impose upon the trip? Ask the following questions. Is this the right aircraft for the flight? Am I familiar with and current in this aircraft? Aircraft performance figures and the AFM are based on a brand new aircraft flown by a professional test pilot. Keep that in mind while assessing personal and aircraft performance. Is this aircraft equipped for the flight? Instruments, lights, navigation, and communication equipment adequate? Can this aircraft use the runways available for the trip with an adequate margin of safety under the conditions to be flown? Can this aircraft carry the planned load? Can this aircraft operate at the altitudes needed for the trip? Does this aircraft have sufficient fuel capacity with reserves for trip legs planned? Does the fuel quantity delivered match the fuel quantity ordered? V is environment, weather. Weather is a major environmental consideration. Earlier, it was suggested pilots set their own personal minimums, especially when it comes to weather. As pilots evaluate the weather for a particular flight, they should consider the following. What are the current ceiling and visibility? In mountainous terrain, consider having higher minimums for ceiling and visibility, particularly if the terrain is unfamiliar. Consider the possibility that the weather may be different than forecast. Have alternate plans and be ready and willing to divert should an unexpected change occur. Consider the winds at the airport being used and the strength of the crosswind component. If flying in mountainous terrain, consider whether there are strong winds aloft. Strong winds in mountainous terrain can cause severe turbulence and downdrafts and be very hazardous for aircraft even when there is no other significant weather. Are there any thunderstorms present or forecast? If there are clouds, is there any icing, current, or forecast? What is the temperature dew point spread and the current temperature at altitude? Can descent be made safely all along the route? If icing conditions are encountered, is the pilot experienced at operating the aircraft's de-icing or anti-icing equipment? Is this equipment in good condition and functional? For what icing conditions is the aircraft rated, if any? Terrain. Evaluation of terrain is another important component of analyzing the flight environment. To avoid terrain and obstacles, especially at night or in low visibility, determine safe altitudes in advance by using the altitudes shown on VFR and IFR charts during pre-flight planning. Use maximum elevation figures, MEFs, and other easily obtainable data to minimize chances of an in-flight collision with terrain or obstacles. Airport. What lights are available at the destination and alternate airports? VASI, PAPI, or ILS glide slope guidance? Is the terminal airport equipped with them? Are they working? Will the pilot need to use the radio to activate the airport lights? Check the notices to airmen, NOTAMs, for closed runways or airports. Look for runway or beacon lights out, nearby towers, etc. Choose the flight route wisely. An engine failure gives the nearby airports supreme importance. Are there shorter or obstructed fields at the destination and/or alternate airports? Airspace. If the trip is over remote areas, are appropriate clothing, water, and survival gear on board in the event of a forced landing? If the trip includes flying over water or unpopulated areas with the chance of losing visual reference to the horizon, the pilot must be prepared to fly IFR. Check the airspace and any temporary flight restrictions, TFRs, along the route of flight. Nighttime. Night flying requires special consideration. If the trip includes flying at night over water or unpopulated areas with the chance of losing visual reference to the horizon, the pilot must be prepared to fly IFR. Will the flight conditions allow a safe emergency landing at night? Pre-flight, all aircraft lights, interior and exterior, for a night flight. Carry at least 2 flashlights, one for the exterior pre-flight and a smaller one that can be dimmed and kept nearby. E is external pressures. External pressures are influences external to the flight that create a sense of pressure to complete a flight, often at the expense of safety. Factors that can be external pressures include the following: someone waiting at the airport for the flight's arrival, a passenger the pilot does not want to disappoint, the desire to demonstrate pilot qualifications, the desire to impress someone. Probably the two most dangerous words in aviation are "watch this." The desire to satisfy a specific personal goal, get home-itis, get there-itis, and let's go-itis. The pilot's general goal completion orientation. Emotional pressure associated with acknowledging that skill and experience levels may be lower than a pilot would like them to be. Pride can be a powerful external factor. Management of external pressure is the single most important key to risk management because it is the one risk factor category that can cause a pilot to ignore all other risk factors. External pressures put time-related pressure on the pilot and figure into a majority of accidents. The key to managing external pressure is to be ready for and accept delays. Remember that people get delayed when traveling on airlines, driving a car, or taking a bus. The pilot's goal is to manage risk, not create hazards. Please help us spread the word about Pilot Training System, and we look forward to further servicing your flight training needs.